We all know we can use GenAI to translate, and it works pretty well. But what's going on with respect to how it works and who's helping it work? And so I want to just throw out a few ideas about capital. Here's the ideas. We have databases of bitexts and general databases of language use in many languages. And that is dead linguistic labor. Somebody has produced language, the result of it is put into the database, the act of enunciation and the situation has disappeared, and we get all this stuff, dead linguistic labor accumulated. And we have algorithms that are able to come along and turn that dead labor into value. It can be used to help further production of language in situation. Okay. And my idea is that this is a form of capital like any capital used in industry. Uh, what's interesting is that the use of capital is productive and is helpful to many people. But is it stealing stuff from the people who first produced it? And if we go back to where these ideas come from, which is Marx writing on capital, we can get citations that show us how to criticize capitalism, of course. What does capital do? It's sucking the value out of the labor. The more labor we get, the more value is sucked out, the bigger the capital gets, and the capitalist can accumulate wealth without having to work. The capital does the work for the capitalist. And this leads to social inequalities, and certainly did so in the 19th century. That critique, though, deserves to be updated. There is a rather perverse theory that Marx dedicated his major work to capital of all the things in the economy that he was analyzing, because he was secretly in love with the mysteries of the way this collective accumulation of surplus value could produce further value. And his mission in life was to screw that system and create its child, communism, as state capitalism. Okay, so the problem, if you read Marx in that way, is not so much the fact that capitalism does accumulate value, that takes value out of something that somebody's done. In the 19th century, you would just pay the workers as much as they need to reproduce the working class, and the rest is capital for the capitalist. That not need be the case, certainly in the 20th or 21st century. The real problem for us is who controls the algorithms, who has that capital, and who controls the algorithms that extract value from the capital. But let me go through this a bit more slowly to try to figure out what we can say about linguistic capitalism. Let's see. When we produce language in a situation, it's for an effect in an exchange. And after that situation has disappeared, something remains, okay? And there is a supplementary value. Now, where can we find that remainder? You don't have to look very far. I mean, what's a dictionary? A dictionary is composed of past language use. Somebody has produced language in these situations. The Oxford English Dictionary was based on people cutting out and sending in snippets of language use, and the dictionary was compiled on that basis. It was a database of dead language, if you like. But so is any corpus. The corpora we have around are databases of dead language use. Okay. But the whole thing is then the translation memories that we had operating, since the beginning of the 1990s. We've had them for a long time. They are doing this. They are taking dead language, dead translations. The translator does the translation. The translator is paid for the translation. The client receives the translation. Oh, and there's this added thing over here, the memory. Whose memory is it? Well, all the translators were keeping their memories, but all the clients, if they were language companies, were keeping their memories. And then the technology came in with the larger language companies, where you were translating online, and as soon as you put in your translation, whoops, that's into the database of the company. And the technologies and it made sure that the language labor was siphoned away, sucked away, as Marx would say, by the capitalist for their future well-being. They can use that to produce and help to produce further translations. This is how we get to the machine translation databases that we have, comprising bitexts, and and then in LLMs, the use of anything that's out there in electronic form can become linguistic capital for the further production of language. And this works. It does help in further production, that there is value in it. Okay. Now, is that scandalous? And anybody who cites Marx in that context would expect me to say, this is daylight robbery. We are stealing the language work of the impoverished and of the global south, especially, and of anybody who doesn't pay attention to what's happening with their language. Yeah, sure, we can denounce that, but don't forget, it does actually work. And there may be examples around us that do similar things. For example, how does a language change? I mean, a language, a language like English, French, Spanish, Chinese, whatever, they all change. How do they change? Well, they change through usage. How does the usage get into the language system? Ah, it's a system that siphons up the creativity of individual users. People like that expression, they like that idiom, it gets into general usage and disseminates. Uh, I want to suggest that perhaps the way linguistic capitalism is working in our databases is not that different, basically, from the way natural languages have been working, perhaps forever. Okay. So the mysteries are more than just what we've got now. Now, this is me, right? That's me there. And that's, let me see, Routledge, for example. Okay. All right. So, so I write books. Routledge publishes the book. I sign a contract, and Routledge has sold my words to OpenAI for the benefit of their databases. And did I receive anything from that? Well, I've looked closely at my payments and nope, I have not received anything for that. How upset should I be about this? Well, if I depended on writing and publishing books for my livelihood, I would be pretty pissed off and I would want some of the payment. Part of the fees that they got from OpenAI should come through to me. And that seems just a basic ethical relationship. Although I did read through my contract, and Routledge basically claims they can do whatever they like with my words in whatever medium should come up in the now or in the very near future. So, they're legal, they can do that. But ethically, it is not appealing to me. But am I that worried about it? No, because I don't depend on that for my income. The way the system works, academically at least, as I hope you know, the book is out there, that accrues prestige for the institution I work for. Therefore, the institution pays me because that prestige brings in students who pay some money. So it's an extended, more complicated economy than that. Beyond that, quite honestly, I do write books and publish and even do things like this because I like to contribute to ongoing debates. And if anything I do remotely resembles knowledge, hey, I'm pretty happy it gets into a database and might be thought about by somebody else now or in the future on the other side of the world. It doesn't really matter. That's part of the reason why I engage in that particular kind of language activity. So I'm not that upset about it, but yes, the payments could be made, please. Now, let me just follow through this idea of linguistic capitalism. as perhaps having benefits that could be better distributed, but having other virtues as well. Look, back in the day, there was something called the Human Language Project, which originally was to be based on the Human Genome Project, when researchers all over the world got together and mapped the human genome, because that map is of use to all those researchers. Okay, of collective benefit to humanity, because this genome is shared by us all. And the idea was to do something similar with the world's languages. And at one stage, look, I'm sure I remember this, but I can't find any trace of it. At one stage, the idea was that the language companies or any entity that had language data would give it freely into the pool of collective language data, and that we would be able to have a map of all the world's languages, and that this would be of benefit to everybody. I can find traces of that. I mean, this is beneficial humanitarian capitalism, like the Human Genome Project. I can find traces of this back in the 2010 with this claim here, which is heavily based on the idea of saving the many smaller languages that are disappearing in the world. Save them now, map them now, before the language disappears entirely, and a laudable project in that respect. Uh, go through 2017, we get a bit more interesting. This is now in Europe, and they see that this capitalist project is developing, but it's developing where? Among the big players, like Google, Microsoft are mentioned, and they are suspect because they are not European. So we find that Europeans are using the technology to communicate across languages, but the people controlling the technology, owning the databases in this case, are not European. And that report, I think, should have called for something more radical, like building up databases in Europe, but it didn't. It sort of was diffuse and talked about just investing more in language technologies. And then if we go back to Taos, which was the place that I think had that idea of, hey, everybody, let's contribute. And then everybody woke up and said, hey, wait a minute, the databases, that's what we get paid for. That's our stock, that's our gold, right? That's our capital. We're not going to give that away. We need it because we want to be able to produce good machine translations down the line. All right. So I think the one that I remember just sort of disappeared. Instead of that, we do have something there, which is calling for diversity in human speech data, especially, but also text data. And it does claim to be helping underrepresented communities, that they want to build up databases to help maintain and bring into digital space the many minor languages. But ultimately, it is a commercial project, okay, with noble aims. Now, all of these projects do not feel tainted by the idea of capitalism sucking value out. They are all based on the idea that the construction of large language data, linguistic capital, can be of real benefit to many, many people, and especially to the smaller languages that don't have that capital. So, what's interesting for me is that it's possible to make an argument, a positive argument, for capital, not for capitalism as the class-based use of capital, but for capital as something that is worth knowing about and having. Here's something I've been using in talks this year, 2025. This is the last time I'm going to use it. So you can have the quick test if you haven't done it before. It's a quick Kahneman type test. Okay, you've got this, you're going to place repeated bets of 100 euros or dollars or whatever you want. Okay, what are you going to do? 90% chance of winning 1,000 euros? 90%? Yeah. Or a 10% chance of winning 100,000 euros. Which one would you do? And if you're smart, you'll think, wait a minute. In the second one, I've got a 90% chance of losing the bet. So when I do this, you know what all the translators do? the translators. Well, freelance translators, the students. The first one, oh, I get 1,000. It's 90%. That's good. I don't want to risk losing all my money. So you go to the first one, right? I can do the calculation there. It's not very well presented, but if you place 100 bets, and I did say, but people forgot, repeated bets, repeated bets. If you do 100 and the odds pan out, you'll finish up with 90,000 if you go for the risk averse bet. And you finish up with 1 million if you go for the risk-taking bet. Okay, it's not really risk-taking. You just go for the long term. All right, you go in for the long term. And when I do this, the people who are in any position to invest money, people who have translation and language companies, or a few university professors, I must add, tend to go for the second bet. Okay, we'll take the second bet because I can think beyond the individual act and I can think in the longer term of repeated acts. Do you see what I'm getting at? Okay. Unfortunately, the citation here is from Jeff Bezos. Given a 10% chance of 100 times payoff, you should take that bet every time. Okay, every time. And that's how Amazon could be set up and run and not make a profit for what, for 14 years, a consistent profit. And I made the mistake of using this. And so all the people attending my lecture thought I was defending Jeff Bezos. And no, I didn't get invited to his wedding. So no, I'm not supporting Amazon. I'm just supporting or trying to explain why capital can work because it extends over time for the benefits to accrue. Okay. Now, large organizations can finance repeated investment. When I ask people in the class, why didn't you go for the second bet? And I said, let's think if you get 100, would you do that? I'd say, no, I haven't got enough money to bet 100 times. I don't have enough capital to get into capitalism. I can't think in the long term. I have to think in the short term because I don't have enough money on me. Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. That's why translators tend to be risk averse, I think. Large organizations can make the repeated investments. The lone translator cannot generally. Okay. Large organizations can tolerate low stakes errors. Okay. When you get your machine translation or AI translation out and you know there are some errors there, the translator will, oh, look, there's a mistake. Oh, there's one there. There's one there. They'll pick out those errors. But the large organization is working on large stretches of text and lots of stuff in the database. And they'll know that there are errors there, but they can tolerate the errors, at least if they are low stakes. And they should be able to pay for checking post-editing or whatever for the high stakes part of the text. If they're not, they're going to lose their bets. All right. And a large language company tends to be increasing profits these days. We have the study there done with Esther Torres, whereas freelancers all over the world are not doing well. In some countries, they are getting relatively poorer. In others, they are maintaining. But any data you get over the past 10 years will show that the large companies are increasing profits and the smaller companies are not in the translation sector, I must add. Okay. There are still star translators. There are still great conference interpreters. There are still superb literary figures who translate. It's no rule, but in general, statistically, there is a bifurcation. And this is one of the things that we know happens with new technology. With a major technological change, one of the immediate consequences, midterm consequences, is wage dispersion. People who can use the technology get marginally, proportionally richer. People who cannot remain the same or get relatively poorer. Now, the question is then, if the capital, linguistic capital, is beneficial, who should control it? Who should control it? Now, Pedro Sanchez, president of Spain, did make the suggestion earlier on this year, 2025, that we cannot have private American companies controlling the way people in Spain communicate with each other, which is what's happening with generalized use of Gen AI. And the proposal was we should have state intervention. It should be state capital. That public organizations, Spanish or European, should set up their own linguistic capital so that it's not controlled from the outside. There's lots wrong with that, you will say. Lots wrong, yes, lots wrong, because do we trust the state? Do I trust the state more than I trust Microsoft? I don't know. Do I trust anybody? Not really. But it's a trade-off. It's a trade-off, and I think these are things we have to think about quite radically. Obviously, uh, if this capital is good and beneficial for those people who use it, then we need people to contribute to it and some kind of citizen-based control over it. It can be a society of users, but that has not eventuated with any success that I can see. It could work through various levels of governments, and that might seem successful in Singapore, for example. But of course, the more you do that, the more you allow for state surveillance of everything that's done on these platforms. And that is the trade-off. Okay, that's where you have to ask to what extent you trust the state. So I'm not going to answer that question, who should control linguistic capital? It belongs in the realm of the unknown unknowns, okay, as we can see there, or deep uncertainty. We don't know what's going to happen in 20 years, but I do seriously suggest that we should start thinking about linguistic capital in positive terms as it being a good thing, and then start thinking about the various ways in which it can be controlled and that it can be used for mutual benefits.